the formation of the United States began a grand experiment in government. The ratification of the U.S. Constitution marked the first time any nation had dared to put a formal distance between church and state. Our founding fathers carefully studied the ancient governing states and kingdoms from the Greeks and Romans, the Saxons, and the theocracies of the medieval era. They had seen the dangers of church-state unions of both Europe and colonial America. They knew, firsthand, about state-sponsored religious persecution. Our American founders wisely took the best features from various governments and left out the worst features, those that would impinge on personal freedoms. Fortunately, they left out the Judeo-Christian theocracies. Through careful thought, our founding fathers produced a constitutional republic, not a democracy, as some people falsely believe. In fact, nowhere in the Declaration of Independence or the U.S. Constitution does it mention democracy. Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution guarantees to every state in this union a republican form of government. So when the Christian president like George W. Bush describes America as a democracy, he hasn't a clue as to what kind of government he wishes to rule. Although a republic evolved out of past democratic governments, and our local governments retain some elements of democracy, the U.S. system relies on representatives to establish laws rather than through the voting public or imperial-minded presidents. During the Constitutional Convention of 1787, no one supported a direct form of democracy. On the contrary, our founders feared pure democracy, because it provides no checks and balances on the people themselves. Democracies have ever been spectacles of turbulence and conflict, have ever been found incompatible with personal security or the rights of property, and have in general been as short in their lives as they have been violent in their deaths. The ancient Greeks invented democracy. The word comes from the Greek demos meaning the people, and kratein meaning to rule. The two words combined literally means rule by the people. Later, the Romans took some of their governmental ideas from the Greeks and evolved a representative democracy which had representatives from the nobility in the Senate and representatives from the commoners in the assembly. The Roman government divided between these two branches and they voted on various issues. Even common law derives from the pagan Romans and Saxons. Our founding fathers based the United States government on the Greek, Roman, and Anglo-Saxon ideas along with free thought ideas from the Enlightenment. Jefferson saw the Anglo-Saxons as originators of the institutions of representative government and trial by jury. The terms, life and liberty, the pursuit of happiness, self-evident truths, according to Mapp, were not just glittering ornaments to brighten somber discourse. They were terms specifically defined in the writings of the Scottish Enlightenment to which Jefferson had been introduced by William Small and which he continued to study with great avidity. Mapp, of course, the Enlightenment went against the grain of Christian, Jewish, and Islamic thought, and by this standard, meets the requirements of pagan thought. Of course, the ancient Greeks, Romans and Anglo-Saxons practiced paganism, and thus our form of government derives entirely from pagan ideas. If, indeed, the United States rests upon a Christian foundation, then why did our American leaders and architects not construct U.S. government buildings on the foundations of the Temple of Solomon, or cathedral architecture from the Holy Dark Ages? Why didn't they construct buildings to worship Jehovah, Jesus, or Allah? Of course they didn't, because of their obvious and blatant intent to reflect the United States, as a pagan nation. This gives the reason why the architects of the United States Capitol building, state capitol buildings, court buildings, libraries, and national banks throughout America modeled their buildings after pagan Greek and Roman architecture. The Greek Parthenon and the Roman Pantheon, perhaps the greatest buildings in history, has served as the template for many U.S. buildings. The Supreme Court building, the Second Bank of the United States, and the Lincoln Memorial, for example, took their design from the Parthenon, a religious Greek temple dedicated to the goddess Athena. The Pantheon with its majestic dome has influenced the design of many government buildings, including the Jefferson Memorial and the U.S. Capitol building. In fact, the word Capitol comes from the name of an ancient temple of Jupiter on the Capitoline Hill in Rome.